hold them accountable when they do something wrong, teach them what it means to treat people with empathy and respect, teach them what necessary force is, teach them that deadly force should be used rarely and only when life is at risk.
Yes, as with any profession, there are officers, no question, who aren't suited for the job. Some will cause trouble, sometimes worse. We've seen that. But in my experience, this is rare and becoming rare.
Well, that's testimony on Capitol Hill today. Meantime, we have some breaking news tonight. Fox News has just confirmed one of 4 fired Minneapolis police officers charged in the death of George Floyd has posted bail. Thomas Lane was released from jail this afternoon after being locked up for about a week. Lane had been held in lieu of a $750,000 cash bail. Let's bring in our panel, talk about police reform, what's happening, what's not. Charles Hurt, opinion editor for the Washington Times. Former Tennessee Congressman Harold Ford Jr., now currently the chairman of RX Saver, and Matthew Continetti, founding editor of the Washington Free Beacon. Charlie, the president says he's coming out with some reforms, list of reforms. The testimony today really dealt with a lot of different factors. Is there some bipartisan solution to this?
I think that there certainly are. Obviously, the devil is in the details. But that testimony from Mr. Floyd's brother, I thought, was remarkable. It was very powerful. And it was a reminder that the things that he talked about are things that I think just about everybody, certainly every politician that has talked about any of this stuff in America today would agree with. And when he talked about the things that needed to be done, such as better training for police officers and teaching and reinforcing the fact that deadly force must be rare and only when life is at stake, that's a far cry from some of the crazier things that we're hearing some people talk about defunding police departments and things like that. I wish that the peaceful protesters and the Democrat Party, everybody would just turn to Mr. Floyd's brother and listen to him, because what he's talking about right there has support from 99% of Americans and is probably a very wise way to go forward from here.
All right, here is the president today meeting in the cabinet room with some African-American leaders.
You go down a list of criminal justice reform and all of the things we've done, opportunity zones, the best unemployment rate in the history just before the plague came in, and it's going to be back again soon. But you look at all of the things we've done, we've now worked on prison reform, so important, and so many other things. But when you look at the economics, when you look at how well the black community has been doing under this administration, nobody's done anything like we've done.
There's a lot of questions about polls nowadays and which ones are good and which ones are bad. The Gallup poll has been cited by this president numerous times when his approval was high. This Gallup poll just out, he takes a 10-point hit from the beginning of May, and disapproval is up. And then on party identification, down 7 among Republicans, independents down 7, Democrats down 9, but he's already down at the bottom of the barrel there. Harold, where do you see this now as far as this president and what he does or doesn't have to do to change his situation?
Charlie laid out very well what the country, particularly Democrats, should do with Mr. Floyd's brother's testimony, which I agree with Charlie was all the things he said, plus raw and compelling, all of it very consistent with the Floyd family's eulogy of their brother and uncle and father. I would hope the president would listen as well. It's my understanding that some senior members of the president's staff, including his son-in-law, was on the Hill meeting with Senator Scott, and President Trump was at the same time touting that he's opposed to banning chokeholds and limiting or lifting the limited liability protections that policemen or cops enjoy. He should follow Mr. Floyd's brother's recommendations. I think we could find an easy and quick and powerfully effective answer to the challenges that a lot of Americans are facing. Now, with regard to that polling and listening to what the president said in that meeting with some African-American leaders, it was interesting. COVID unmasked and showed the fragility that a lot of Black American households face, particularly working black households face, and the kinds of things that we need to be thinking about, the kinds of investments we need to be thinking about as a nation. So as much as the president is proud of the things he's done, and he should be, COVID-19 has revealed to us as a nation the kinds of things that particularly African Americans and brown and black communities are facing, including the fact that black and brown households faced a much, much harsher reality from COVID than other households. And then the poll numbers, I agree with you, Brett, they are real, at least at the moment. The president could easily come back. But the most disturbing thing I saw on your show tonight was that family in New Jersey, the brothers that decided to reenact some episode that they believed happened in Minneapolis, which we all saw on tape, as if that was some way to say to the country, this is the right way to go. And although the president's not responsible for what they did, he does have some responsibility to denounce it, since they all were wearing Trump T-shirts and Trump banners as they reenacted that
Matthew, let me get you to weigh in here.
Well, look, Brett, I think the president is facing three interlocking crises: the crises of the pandemic, the crisis of the economy, and now the crisis of the social unrest in the wake of the George Floyd killing. The public has turned against him on two of those three, the pandemic and the Floyd killing. And so it's very important for him, I think, to recover the lost ground by encouraging the bipartisan efforts of Senator Scott to work out some type of police reform bill.
And Charlie, quickly, does he give a speech on this moment as far as a race speech?
Oh, I think he will, and I think he'll talk a lot about it between now and the election. And I think that he's got a very strong position to stick up for the police because the majority of police are very good people. They have very, very difficult jobs. And the fact that the idea that you're going to that you have an entire political party appearing to run off with this notion that police departments should be burned down or shut down or defunded or whatever, that's crazy. And if Donald Trump, between now and the election, is running against that, he's going to have a very, very strong hand.